Knives Out is a film series that I think all of Hollywood should be taking notes on. An original franchise by an auteur filmmaker bringing innovative and topical new spins to classic tropes, letting big-name actors explore outside their comfort zones, balancing comedy and drama, style and substance, each new film feeling distinct from the last, and all with some of the most meticulously crafted storylines that we've seen in years.
You know, this is truly delightful.
If you can't tell, I like these movies quite a bit. But it makes you wonder, when each new movie is so different from the last, which one is the best? Which film had the best story, the best characters, or the best themes? Let's start by taking a look at Knives Out. A Knives Out mystery. Going back to this movie 5 years and 2 sequels later is interesting. On the one hand, sure, this movie got the ball rolling in a lot of ways. Generally speaking, it's a well-written, well-directed story that manages to be tense and unpredictable, but is also able to be silly and over-the-top when it needs to be, making for a very entertaining movie. But in other ways, there are sort of indications that this is where the franchise was just sort of finding its footing, or at the very least setting the foundations for things to come. Stylistically, this is kind of where the movies are at their most standard. An old mansion with a rich family and massive inheritance is not the most unique setup for a mystery, which, to be fair, is essentially what the movie is going for. It sets itself up to be as tropey as possible initially, lulling you into a false sense of security until it shakes that premise up fairly early on. But it does sort of mean that, at least aesthetically, what you see is what you get. And while Daniel Craig is acting his ass off in such an out-of-left-field casting choice, seriously, I don't know how anyone thought to cast him of all people as a character who sounds like this.
Halle Berry, that has a kick.
But God, it was a stroke of brilliance. But to get back to my point, as much as he slips away into this role, visually, he's not that far off from appearing to just be James Bond with a southern drawl. Marta makes for a good sympathetic protagonist, though. First of all, the fact that she even is the protagonist is a surprise in and of itself, considering that the film's marketing didn't portray her as particularly significant. Look, there she is, all the way in the back there. And while Ana de Armas has done pretty well for herself in the years since this movie, and even at the time she wasn't entirely unknown, she doesn't inherently draw the same level of widespread attention as some of the other cast members in this. And that makes sense given her role in the story. She's depicted as someone who constantly gets shafted by the Thrombey family who take her for granted, and despite her working closely with them, they don't seem to know anything about her or even really care.
But really, she's like part of the family. Family's from Paraguay. Your family is from Uruguay.
Your Brazilian nurse.
And the reveal that she's seemingly the one who killed Harlan Thrombey, albeit accidentally, is both unexpected and really effective from a dramatic perspective. Ana de Armas really sells the slowly rising despair of, oh God, what have I done? To, okay, don't worry, it's probably fine. To, come on, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. To finally, I've really just killed a man, haven't I?
Oh my God. I'm gonna give you an emergency shot of naloxone so you don't die in 10 minutes.
Do you have an extra stuff?
Yes, I'm gonna find it. He's not here, Harlan.
There's no music or flashy directing, it just lets the shock and guilt Marta is feeling sink in, and it's enough that even for the vast majority of the movie where you believe she's to blame, you're rooting for her to get away with it. The especially clever thing though is that even though the killer has seemingly been identified only a third of the way into the movie, the film hasn't been falsely advertised because the mystery element doesn't entirely go away for the rest of the film. There are still unexpected twists, like Harlan leaving his immense fortune entirely to Marta, creating a brand new conflict throughout the rest of the plot.
I leave in their entirety to Marta Cabrera.
Not to mention the new levels of intrigue as certain characters somehow know that something's amiss. All of that culminating in a final reveal where there was actually something more sinister to Harlan's death right from the beginning, and what we thought was the answer to the mystery was really just a piece of the puzzle. As for the Thrombey family, they work. They essentially serve the role of antagonists who are as nice as is convenient for them to be. Throughout the movie, they talk about how much they appreciate Marta and how she's part of the family, but it's all expressed through superficial, half-hearted niceties like small talk while phone scrolling, half-second hugs, and roping her reluctantly into their political debates.
America is for America.
Don't point at me.
Where's Marta? Is she still here?
Oh,
Marta,
God, don't.
Come on
No.
over.
When the chips are down, though, they're all stuck-up, spoiled brats who will fight tooth and nail to claim their father's inheritance, regardless of whether it's what he would have wanted or whether they actually deserve it. As soon as the little tidbit about the inheritance is dropped and they're all left to fend for themselves for the first time in their lives, any pretense of liking Marta completely drops, as they instantly start treating her not just as the outsider that they always saw her as, but as an invader, complete with baseless accusations.
Were you boinking my father?
Mob mentality. Thinly veiled legal threats.
Marta, if your mother came into the country illegally, criminally, so I'd be afraid that could come to light.
And just straight up conspiring to overturn their own father's will through any loophole they can find.
Well, what the hell's the Slayer rule?
Well, it's if someone is convicted of killing the person, they don't get their inheritance.
One issue I have with the Thrombies, though, is that for as many of them as there are, a lot of them kind of blend together. They each have some unique traits, like Walt having a son who he's so disengaged with that he allows him to fall into the alt-right.
Kids today with the internet, it's amazing.
Richard is having an affair.
That's none of your business.
But none of these really make me say, oh, that's so Walt, or that's Richard for you. Frankly, their personalities are so similar to each other that you could shuffle around a lot of their traits and it wouldn't be too noticeable. It's not so much a varied cast of characters as much as it's an angry mob of more or less the same character. They do have Toni Collette talking like a Valley Girl, though. That's something I didn't know I wanted.
I read a tweet about a New Yorker article about you. You're famous.
With all that said, though, Knives Out is still an impressively strong movie, and any flaws I might have with it are minor ones. Sure, I might be able to point out some problems here and there, but what can you do? It's not like every movie can be as good as The Last Jedi. Glass Onion is comparatively more straightforward than Knives Out. Comparatively being the operative word there. It's still got more twists and turns than a game of Bop It, but unlike Knives Out, where the killer was seemingly revealed a third of the way in, this one hunkers down on the mystery a lot more. The bulk of the story is also told from Benoit Blanc's perspective this time, meaning he gets fleshed out a little more, and Daniel Craig is allowed to chew the scenery in the best possible way.
Nobody tried to kill you, you vainglorious buffoon.
In general, the movie has a much more colorful supporting cast than Knives Out. While in the original, most of the cast were essentially variations of the same character, here we have a bit more variety between them in terms of personality, background, intelligence, etc., and all of them played by a superbly talented cast. We get Edward Norton as Miles Braun, who, disregarding any comparisons you want to make to any real-life shitheads, is a great comedic villain in his own right. The movie sets him up as this eccentric genius, but the longer you watch and the more you realize that's not the case, it's funny seeing him just confidently bumble his way through any interaction and the dopey looks Norton gives whenever the facade cracks. Then you've got Claire DeBella, played by Kathryn Hahn, whose typical dry, condescending style of humor suits this two-faced politician whose convictions crumble at the slightest inconvenience.
I can see the headlines. Governor jets off to Greece with a men's rights YouTuber who dies. Oh my God. No,
You've got Birdie J as a fashion designer who thinks that being socially and politically oblivious just means that you're a creative genius untethered by lame concepts like sensitivity, tact, and the common sense to do basic research into the things she says and does.
Everything is so woke these days, it's out of control.
Yes.
Love you, yes.
Then there's Lionel, and okay, he's kind of boring. But then you've got Dave Bautista as Duke Cody, this men's rights social media influencer. Side note, can I just say that I think this industry needs more of people like Bautista? In an age where Hollywood action stars are so unwilling to show any signs of weakness or step out of their comfort zones, Dave Bautista seems to jump at the chance to experiment with different types of movies and play characters these supposed tough guys don't have the balls to. And nowhere is that more evident than his performance as Duke Cody, this moronic alpha male who spends the movie whining at his mom, begging his girlfriend to sleep with other people to advance his career, and being the first character in the movie to die. To a pineapple allergy, no less, not even something cool. Overall, while the cast represent a similar theme to the first movie of privileged rich people who think they're more deserving of their success than they actually are, there's a lot more variety this time around, making them a lot more entertaining to watch. The premise and visual style have also seen a big upgrade from the first. While the original kept itself to at least appearing as a traditional mystery story, Glass Onion is where the series is allowed to stretch its wings a little more and be a little more unique and over the top. The opening scene is a strong indicator for this, with these intricate mechanical puzzle boxes, and it only gets more elaborate from there. The setting of an eccentric billionaire's private island, complete with robots, celebrity endorsements, and alarm-rigged garden decorations, is, for one thing, more creative, and also allows for a lot more possibilities in the story. The costume design is way more interesting than the first movie, which was mainly just samey, fancy, rich people clothes. I mean, the suit that Blanc wears in the original, Snoresville. Now, this striped bathing suit and bandana, that's what I'd expect from Benoit motherfucking Blanc. It's quirky and odd, but also kind of classy and refined like him. And this scene in particular is a stroke of genius visual storytelling. So the characters are all wearing face masks. By the way, you want to know what year this movie takes place? I'll give you 2020 guesses. And each of their masks tells us something about them. Lionel, being the scientist and the most risk-aware member of the group, wears his mask properly. Claire wears hers with her nose exposed, suggesting she cares about at least appearing to follow the rules, but will break them if it even slightly inconveniences her. Birdie treats her mask more as a fashion statement, completely neglecting the actual safety purpose it's supposed to provide. And Duke, being the tough macho guy, doesn't even bother with it. Blanc, meanwhile, also has his mask on properly, but he's not opposed to a little bit of flourish to go along with it. He's smart, but he also has a certain level of charm and charisma to keep up. When this movie first came out, I adored it. I thought it was way better than the first one, and I even went around calling it my favorite movie of 2022. And then I watched it again for this video. Yeah, I think this is actually my least favorite in the series. Don't get me wrong, it's still really good. It's just that this film kind of suffers from a problem that a lot of mystery stories suffer from. That intrigue of following the characters through every clue and misdirection, wondering where it could possibly be going, and the satisfaction of eventually seeing everything click into place. You can never get that initial feeling back, can you? All you can really do is just hope that the plot on its own is interesting enough to hold you over the second time round. And does Glass Onion do that? Yes.
You hesitated.
Okay, the first half was absolutely fine. The slow burn of just vibing with these fun characters, all the while the mystery is being established under our noses, is very entertaining. The problem comes once the plot twist is introduced halfway into the movie. The one other member of the group, Andy, is actually her twin sister, Helen in disguise. From this point on, the film flashes back to the beginning, and we see the events leading up to this point again, where she and Blanc are secretly investigating Andy's death. The first time I watched this movie, I was on the edge of my seat as everything I had seen up until now got completely recontextualized. On my second viewing for this video, I made it to this point, checked, and saw that there was nearly an hour left of the runtime and thought, oh damn. A lot of the second half hinges on the fun of seeing everything you've watched so far turned on its head, like how Blanc throughout the first half seems oblivious and out of his depth in the presence of Miles, only for the second half to reveal he's just playing dumb so Miles won't suspect him.
Oh my word, oh my goodness me, this is not, that is, what is that?
But on a second viewing where you know where all this is going, a lot of that initial appeal is gone, which could still be made up for if there was at least some strong characterization to go with it, but unfortunately, Helen and Andy are just not as compelling protagonists as Marta was. They're okay, but the motivation feels a little distant. Basically, Andy sued Miles over a dangerous business plan and lost the case unfairly due to Miles and the others screwing her over. Then, after Andy found the proof she needed, she was killed, leaving Helen to solve the case and avenge her sister's death. Helen's primary goal is carrying out the justice that Andy never got to give herself, but there's not a ton of emotional stake in that for the audience. Andy is overall a very minor character in terms of screen time, so you don't feel the emotional weight of her being betrayed by her friends. And Helen and Andy never share any scenes together, so you don't feel the loss or sense of duty that Helen feels towards her dead sister. It just leads to a mystery where the motivation to solve it isn't as strong as it could be. Glass Onion is a tricky one. In a lot of ways, it blows Knives Out of the water to the point where if you were to ask me during one of its best scenes, I would not hesitate to say it's better. But as much as Knives Out doesn't quite live up to Glass Onion's best moments, it is a lot more consistently entertaining, meaning I do kind of have to say that Knives Out is better overall. Wake Up Dead Man is tonally more similar to Knives Out than Glass Onion. The setting this time around is more grounded in reality, taking place in a small town parish, and the cast of characters aren't quite as larger than life as what we saw in Glass Onion. It's not necessarily a bad thing though, and it does come with its advantages. Judd, for example, is, in my opinion, the best main protagonist these movies have had so far. He's a priest with a violent past as a boxer who killed someone in the ring, and is now trying to live as a better person. Tricky subject matter, obviously, but he ends up being incredibly likable. The plot involves him being assigned to this new parish, only to find it being ruled over by Jefferson Wicks, a priest who prefers to lead through pettiness and hate, all while publicly undermining anyone who challenges his authority.
And even if in the light of day it's indefensible, deep down in the dark, it scratches an itch.
It's enough to make you root for Judd every step of the way. All he wants is to just live a peaceful life and share that peace with the world around him. All the while, he's constantly getting alienated by Wicks weaponizing everyone's faith against him. This eventually leads to Wicks's death and Judd being considered a suspect, making him even more isolated from Wicks's followers.
Nat, I can come over later if you want to talk.
I don't think I'd prefer that.
Quite frankly, the movie is actually pretty restrained with Benoit Blanc at first. Outside of a very brief scene near the beginning, he doesn't show up until 40 minutes into the movie, which gives the audience plenty of time to establish Judd as a character and what his values are, as well as establish this hateful hierarchy that Wicks has established and Judd is fighting back against. And when Blanc finally does show up, it leads to some great discussions about Judd's faith and why he became a priest. Blanc is an atheist, outright calling God a fiction, and holds basically nothing but resentment for Catholicism.
Child's fairy tale filled with malevolence and misogyny and homophobia.
Truth be told, this is honestly the deepest look into Benoit Blanc that these movies have ever given us. Ironically, despite being the one who solves all the cases, he's kind of the most mysterious character in the franchise. We generally only get vague glimpses into his personal life, like in this movie where it's implied he's a bit of an Andrew Lloyd Webber fan. And in this scene, we get this incredibly subtle but also very telling bit of insight.
My mother was very religious, you know.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
Family?
Yeah, that's right.
I love this moment because it trusts you to put the pieces together for yourself. Considering the implication in Glass Onion that Blanc is gay, and not to put too fine a point on it, but he is from the South, it's not entirely surprising why he's not on good terms with his Catholic mother or Catholicism in general. But then we hear Judd's thoughts on the topic. From my own perspective, I'm kind of on Blanc's side here. I'm not religious. In fact, I don't really care for the concept of religion in general. But hearing Judd's take on it did give me an alternate perspective that I hadn't considered before.
Did these stories convince us of a lie? Or did they resonate with something deep inside us that's profoundly true?
Touché, Padre.
It's a really fascinating discussion about how even if a lot about a religion or ideology has some ugly and hurtful aspects, and even if you can never be entirely certain it's based in reality, there's something there that can speak to people in a deep and beneficial way. I especially like this scene about halfway through the movie where Judd and Blanc have found a clue and urgently need to get some documentation from a construction company to verify it.
Whoever called in that order, that's the key.
Okay, yeah.
Judd calls the company, which at first leads to a very funny scene of him desperately trying to get things moving, while the receptionist on the other side is being a little too chatty.
The reason I'm calling, Louise, is to
I've been to that church of yours, but I don't think you were there.
No, I'm new.
Only for the scene to suddenly take a drastic tonal shift where Judd finds out that this woman is actually deeply upset and looking for someone to talk to.
I'm feeling pretty alone right now.
And despite how much of a hurry he was in, he puts his own needs aside and spends what seems like at least a few hours helping her through it.
Anytime, day or night, I'm here for you.
The actual mystery itself is about what you'd expect from a Knives Out movie at this point, but I mean that in the best possible way. Wicks' death, by all accounts, seems captivatingly impossible when you first see it, but the movie does a fantastic job of slowly piecing it together in a way that makes sense. Hell, not only does the movie have the best protagonist in the franchise, I'd argue it also has the best mystery. It's complex and subverts your expectations in a way where it's honestly really impressive that Rian Johnson has managed to keep the same level of momentum up for 3 movies and counting. That's not to say that the movie is perfect though, because it does have its issues. For me, the primary one is that the supporting cast isn't that great. I mean, the main cast, including Blanc, Judd, Wicks, and his assistant Martha Delacroix, they're all cool. But the rest of the cast, Wicks's followers, who essentially serve as the other main suspects in the crime, just aren't as fleshed out as the ones in the previous films, and especially after Glass Onion, this feels like a particularly notable step back. Some of them are mildly interesting, like Draven, an online conservative content creator, and Simone, a disabled woman hoping that God will heal her, which, to her credit, this scene is fucking great.
Jesus!
I can walk, Martha. Just hurts.
But for pretty much all of them, the qualities about them that we're either meant to sympathize with or condemn them for are just sort of glanced over, and their personalities are a little bland. There's a police chief who's played by Mila Kunis, presumably for a reason, but I feel like this character could have been played by just about anyone. They also talk about Wicks's mother, Grace, who is a minor character in the story. They tell the story of how she was supposedly a woman who lived in sin and was ostracized from the community for her wicked ways, even by her own son.
She loved revealing clothes and her fancy brands.
Then, as the story goes on, you find out that this was actually a tragic case of a woman who spent her life being abused by this community for not meeting their religious standards. The community then spent the next several decades demonizing her for not appreciating their attempts to save her.
The shameful sin of the harlot whore.
That poor girl.
It's a good idea, but I wish it could have been explored a little more. I'll admit, when the story of the harlot whore was first told at the beginning of the movie, I was sort of thinking to myself in the back of my head that her father bribing her with his inheritance into locking herself away for years, only to hold out on his end of the deal, seemed a little unfair and not the justified outcome that it was being presented as. And then when the characters eventually point out that it was unfair, I thought to myself, good, it's not just me. But while I can say that objectively the way Grace was treated was a little harsh, the movie doesn't really do a lot to make you sympathize with her as a character. The movie eventually presents her as a desperate woman needing that inheritance to escape her current life. But the persecution she received is never really elaborated on all that much. We never get to see what this girl was actually like, how she suffered, or how bad it was. Still though, even with its fair share of flaws, Wake Up Dead Man is still a great evolution of the Knives Out formula. It takes a lot about what worked in the previous movies, does a lot better, a couple things slightly worse, but in the process it gives us the best protagonist that these movies have had, as well as the best emotional core. How could you go wrong? With all that said though, which of these movies is the best? Each one of them has its pros and cons, each to varying degrees, and what one does sort of subpar, another might excel at. Knives Out, I would argue, is the most well-rounded of the 3. It doesn't really have any absolute weak points, and pretty much everything about it is, at the very least, good, even if not all aspects equally push the envelope. Glass Onion has probably the strongest identity of these movies, with the best setting, best supporting cast, and best satire and social commentary, even if the main character kinda drags it down a bit in my opinion. Wake Up Dead Man also isn't quite as airtight as Knives Out, but it makes up for it with the strongest emotional core of the franchise, creating a storyline that, for me at least, resonates the hardest. In order from worst to best, I'd say Glass Onion, Knives Out, then Wake Up Dead Man. Whatever way you want to look at it though, the fact that this franchise is so varied and so much about it boils down to personal preference, any one of these could have justifiably taken the top spot, which I think is a testament to how good these movies are. Feel free to let me know in the comments what your favorite one is and why, and whichever one you go with, let's just hope that Knives Out 4 ends up being even better. But let's be real here, Forks Out is obviously the best one.
That is because, onion.
Special thanks to my Patreon supporters Heather Reed, Zelda, Moon Goddesses, The Hen Rolled, Chris Spicer, Jacob K, Wasp Sen, Andrew Taylor, Deceiver of Gods, and Antifa Count Duckula. Thank you so much for the support. If you'd like to see your name in the credits, along with early access to scripts and videos, as well as exclusive unused video thumbnails, or if you'd just like to chat with me, consider supporting me on Patreon for just $1.50 a month. The link is in the description.